Imagine growing up in a beautiful house, but there's no floor. Every step you take, you risk falling into the dark. If you had emotionally immature parents, you didn't have a childhood. You had a 20-year survival mission. And tonight, we're going to figure out how it rewired your brain. Let's just sit down and be completely honest for a second. You probably look incredibly put together on the outside. You might have the degree, the stable job, the independent life. People look at you and think you have it all figured out. But you know exactly what happens when you come home, close the bedroom door, and finally drop the mask. There is an overwhelming, heavy exhaustion that washes over you. Not just a physical tiredness, but a deep, unexplainable emptiness. A quiet voice whispering that no matter what you achieve, you are fundamentally flawed. You feel like a burden to the people you love. You feel profoundly alone, even when you are surrounded by friends. And then, almost instantly, the guilt sets in. The self-gaslighting begins. You tell yourself, I shouldn't feel this way. My childhood was fine. You look back and remember that there was always food on the table. You had warm clothes. Your parents paid for your education, and maybe you even went on family vacations. They weren't monsters. They didn't physically abuse you. So, your brain makes the only logical conclusion it can. The problem must be me. You convince yourself that you are simply ungrateful, that you are too sensitive, that you are just broken by default. I need you to hear this very clearly right now. The absence of physical abuse does not equal the presence of emotional safety. Being kept alive is not the same thing as being nurtured. What you are carrying is an invisible trauma. It is the trauma of omission. Not about what was brutally done to you, but what was entirely withheld from you. When parents are emotionally immature, they provide the physical walls of the house, but they completely forget to build the floor. You are not crazy, and you are not ungrateful. I want to validate this for you before we go any further. Just because there were no visible bruises on your skin does not mean your spirit wasn't quietly crushed under the weight of their emotional neglect. I want you to really picture that house we talked about. The walls are painted beautifully. The roof keeps the rain out. To anyone walking by on the street, it looks like the perfect, functional home. But inside, there is no floor. Just dark, empty space between the wooden joists. Living with emotionally immature parents, or EEPs, is exactly like trying to walk in that house. You learn very quickly where not to step. You learn to tiptoe. You become an absolute master of balancing on narrow beams just to survive the day without falling into the abyss. But why is the floor missing? It comes down to 3 core psychological traits that completely define an emotionally immature parent. First, they have a profound emotional phobia. They are terrified of deep feelings, both yours and their own. True emotional intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like a life-threatening loss of control to them. So, when you came to them as a child, carrying a heavy emotion, maybe you were terrified, or you were just inexplicably sad. They didn't know how to sit with you in the dark. They couldn't hold space for your pain. Instead, they deflected it, mocked it, or offered a shallow, aggressive fix just to make your uncomfortable feeling go away. Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about, or you're overreacting again. You learned very early on that your sadness was a dangerous inconvenience. The second trait is extreme egocentricity, and this is where the floor completely falls out from under you. An emotionally immature parent experiences reality solely through the lens of how things affect them. Let's do a quick mental roleplay. Think back to a time you were genuinely upset about something they did. You gathered the courage to express it. You weren't yelling, you were just hurting. What happened? Almost immediately, the script flipped. Suddenly, they were the victim. They might have said something like, well, I guess I'm just the worst mother in the world then. Or, after everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you treat me? In a fraction of a second, your pain was erased. You ended up apologizing and comforting them for the pain they caused you. That is a psychological mind bend. It is a subtle form of manipulation that forces a child to completely abandon their own reality just to stabilize the parent's fragile ego. And the third trait is rigid, black and white thinking. EAPs cannot handle the complex, nuanced grey areas of human life. To them, you are either entirely good or entirely bad. You are either agreeing with them or you are betraying them. If you were the good child, you learned that their love was highly conditional. It was a performance you had to keep up. There was no room for you to have a different opinion, a different timeline, or a different path in life without it being perceived as a personal attack on their identity. When you combine these three things, the fear of emotion, the intense self-focus, and the rigid thinking, you get an environment that is fundamentally unsafe. You spent your entire childhood reaching out in the dark for a solid surface to stand on. You just wanted a simple, "I hear you," or "I'm sorry I hurt you." But every single time you reached for that validation, your foot went right through the floorboards. You didn't develop anxiety out of nowhere. You developed a hyper-vigilant nervous system because you never, ever had a solid floor to rest on. Now that we understand the reality of living in that house with no floor, I want to talk about what actually happens to the person forced to survive inside it. Because the damage of emotionally immature parenting doesn't just stay in your thoughts. It physically alters the biological wiring of your brain. Let's talk about your amygdala. This is the tiny, almond-shaped structure deep inside your brain that acts as your body's internal smoke detector. Its entire job is to scan the environment for danger and keep you alive. In a healthy, emotionally secure childhood, this smoke detector only goes off when there is a real, physical threat. A tiger in the woods, a hot stove, a speeding car. But when you are raised by emotionally immature parents, the threat isn't a tiger. The threat is a sudden shift in their mood. The threat is a heavy sigh from across the room, a slammed cabinet door, or a silent treatment that lasts for 3 agonizing days. Because your parents' emotions were unpredictable, volatile, and entirely self-centered, your brain had to adapt to survive. You had to become a master at reading the microscopic shifts in the atmosphere. You learned to constantly scan their facial expressions, the exact tone of their voice, the way their footsteps sounded on the hallway floor. You were forced to anticipate their emotional dysregulation before it happened, so you could either fix it or hide from it. Imagine the sheer amount of neurological energy it takes for a child to manage the emotional climate of grown adults. While other kids were using their brain power to play, to discover their own identities, and to figure out what they loved, your brain power was being entirely consumed by a threat assessment protocol. You were doing the emotional heavy lifting for the people who were supposed to be lifting you. Doing this every single day for 18 years put your amygdala into a state of chronic hypervigilance. The smoke detector got jammed in the on position, but the human body cannot sustain a constant state of panic. You can't fight or flee from your own parents when you are 7 years old. You are entirely dependent on them. So, when fight or flight isn't an option, your nervous system resorts to its last line of defense, the freeze state. This is heavily regulated by the dorsal branch of your vagus nerve. When the emotional environment becomes too overwhelming, your nervous system essentially pulls the emergency brake. It shuts down. It numbs you out. It forces you to disconnect from your body and your emotions just so you can endure the pain of being unseen. You learnt to make yourself small. You learnt to dissociate. Because if you don't feel anything, they can't hurt you. But the tragic thing about the freeze state is that it doesn't just numb out the pain, it numbs out everything. It numbs out your joy, your passion, and your sense of purpose. This is exactly where that chronic feeling of emptiness comes from. It's not that you don't have a personality, it's that your nervous system has placed your true self behind a thick pane of glass for protection. And this brings us to the biggest plot twist of your adult life. The realization that is going to finally set you free from the guilt you've been carrying. You know that feeling when you have a million things to do, but you just sit on the couch, completely paralyzed? You stare at your phone for hours, unable to initiate even the simplest tasks. And what do you tell yourself in those moments? You tell yourself that you are lazy. You call yourself a procrastinator. You beat yourself up for having no discipline. I need you to stop doing that right now. You are not lazy. Laziness is a choice. Laziness is feeling perfectly rested and deciding you just don't feel like working. What you are experiencing is not a lack of willpower, it is biological exhaustion. Your nervous system has been running a high-stakes survival program in the background of your life for decades. Your vagus nerve is depleted. You are stuck in a chronic, functional freeze state. Your brain is not refusing to work because it's lazy. It is shutting down to conserve energy because it believes you are still under threat. When you sit on that couch, paralyzed, your body is begging for safety. The emptiness you feel isn't a void of character, it is the absolute depletion of your biological battery. You aren't broken, you are just incredibly, deeply tired. So, if your nervous system is utterly exhausted and practically frozen, you might be asking yourself a very logical question right now. How on earth did I manage to get my degree? How did I build this career? How did I become the person that everyone else relies on? If you are biologically depleted, how are you so incredibly high functioning? To understand this, we have to look at the most tragic sacrifice a child can ever make. In developmental psychology, there is a concept that says every human child is born with two fundamental needs: authenticity and attachment. Authenticity is your ability to be who you truly are, to feel your feelings, to express your needs, to exist in your own reality. Attachment is your connection to your caregivers, the bond that physically keeps you alive, fed, and sheltered. When you are raised in a healthy environment, you get to have both. But when you are raised by emotionally immature parents, you are forced into a terrifying psychological ultimatum. You quickly realize that if you express your authentic self, if you show your sadness, your anger, or your boundaries, your parents will withdraw their love, or they will punish you with their emotional volatility. And a child will never, ever choose authenticity over attachment. To a child, losing attachment means death. So, you did what you had to do to survive. You subconsciously cut off your authentic self, pushed it down into the dark, and constructed what psychologists call the false self. You became a shapeshifter. You learned exactly what version of you kept the peace in that house with no floor. For some of you, that meant becoming the golden child. You realized that if you got perfect grades, if you won the awards, if you were entirely self-sufficient and never asked for a single thing, your parents would finally smile. You learned that if you were perfect, you weren't a burden. This is where high-functioning trauma is born. All of that ambition, that relentless drive, that extreme perfectionism you carry today, it isn't actually fueled by passion. It is fueled by a deep, ancient panic. Perfectionism is not about being the best. It is a trauma response designed to make you bulletproof. Your brain believes that if you make zero mistakes, if you anticipate everyone's needs, and if you are constantly over-delivering, no one can criticize you, and no one will abandon you. You became an adult who is addicted to productivity, not because you love the work, but because producing value is the only way you know how to justify your existence on this earth. You became a chronic people pleaser, constantly setting yourself on fire just to keep other people warm. But here is the most heartbreaking part of living in the false self, and it completely explains why you feel so incredibly empty today. When you achieve something amazing, people praise you. They clap for you, they hand you the degree, they give you the promotion. But the praise never actually reaches your core. It just bounces off. Why? Because deep down, you know they aren't clapping for you. They are clapping for the mask. They are clapping for the false self you created. This is the exact root of your imposter syndrome. You feel like a fraud because, on a subconscious level, you are playing a character. You are constantly terrified that one day, people will see behind the curtain. They will see the exhausted, overwhelmed, entirely imperfect inner child, and they will realize you aren't special at all. You have spent your entire life trading your authenticity for a highly conditional, fragile version of love. You have built a glittering, successful, beautiful life on the outside, but because it was built by the false self, it feels completely hollow on the inside. The trophies don't mean anything to a ghost. Now, let's talk about the one area of your life where the false self completely falls apart. Let's talk about your romantic relationships. If you grew up with emotionally immature parents, there is a very high chance that your dating history looks like a series of exhausting, chaotic cycles. You might be deeply frustrated, wondering why you keep attracting the exact same emotionally unavailable person, just in a different body. Or, perhaps even more confusingly, why you completely lose interest the second someone genuinely kind, consistent, and healthy enters your life. You probably tell your friends that you just didn't feel a spark with the nice guy or the nice girl. You say they were just too boring. But I want to offer you a different perspective, a biological perspective. In psychology, there is a concept introduced by Sigmund Freud called repetition compulsion. It is the unconscious drive to repeat a traumatic event or a painful dynamic over and over again. Your brain is essentially a pattern recognition machine. It is designed to seek out what is familiar, because to the primitive brain, familiar equals predictable, and predictable equals safe, even if that familiar thing is actively destroying you. Think about the blueprint of love you were handed as a child. Love was not a calm, safe harbor. Love was a high-stakes negotiation. It was walking on eggshells. It was unpredictable outbursts followed by silent treatments. It was begging for breadcrumbs of validation. Your developing nervous system recorded all of that anxiety, all of that chemical adrenaline and cortisol, and it put it into a folder labeled, "This is what love feels like." So, as an adult, when you meet someone who is a walking red flag, someone who is distant, inconsistent, or emotionally volatile, your brain lights up. It says, I know this game. I know how to survive this. The anxiety of waiting for them to text you back feels exactly like the anxiety of waiting for your parents' mood to stabilize. You mistake that intense, familiar panic for romantic chemistry. And on the flip side, what happens when you meet a green flag? What happens when you meet someone who offers you a solid floor to stand on? Someone who communicates directly, who doesn't play games, who just simply loves you? Your nervous system completely rejects them. To a nervous system that was raised in chaos, peace does not feel peaceful. Peace feels deeply suspicious. When there is no drama to manage, your hypervigilant brain doesn't know what to do with itself. It thinks, this is too quiet. Where is the trap? When is the other shoe going to drop? The boredom you feel with healthy partners isn't actually boredom. It is your nervous system not knowing how to function without cortisol. You sabotage the healthy relationship because you literally do not know how to exist in a house that has a flaw. Let's sit with that for a second, because this is the hardest truth to swallow. You are not addicted to toxic people. You are subconsciously trying to recreate the exact environment of your childhood so that, this time, you can finally win. You are trying to get the emotionally unavailable partner to change and love you, because the wounded child inside of you is still trying to get your emotionally immature parents to change and love you. But it is a game you can never win, because you are playing it with ghosts. So, how do you finally stop playing a game you can't win? How do you build a floor in a house that never had one? It starts with the most painful, yet most liberating concept in psychology: radical acceptance. You have to accept, deeply and completely, that your parents are emotionally blind. They cannot give you what they do not have. You wouldn't be angry at a blind person for not being able to see a beautiful painting you made. Your parents lack the biological and psychological capacity to see your inner world. Expecting them to suddenly wake up and understand you is only breaking your own heart over and over again. This means you have to do something incredibly difficult. You have to grieve the living. You have to hold a psychological funeral for the parents you deserved but never got. You have to mourn the fantasy that one day, if you are just successful enough, or perfect enough, or articulate enough in your arguments, they will finally apologize. They won't. And waiting for that apology is exactly what is keeping your nervous system in a freeze state. Letting go of that hope will feel like a profound loss. But I promise you, on the other side of that grief is absolute freedom. Because here is the most beautiful truth about your brain. It is highly plastic. Thanks to neuroplasticity, the biological wiring we talked about earlier is not permanent. You have the power to rewire it through a process called reparenting. When that overwhelming emptiness hits you at 2 a.m., instead of gaslighting yourself or calling yourself lazy, you step in as the mature, emotionally safe parent you never had. You put your hand on your chest and you say to your inner child, I see you. I know you are exhausted. You are allowed to be sad. You are safe now, and I am not going anywhere. Every time you validate your own reality, you lay down a solid wooden plank. Every time you set a boundary with toxic behavior, you nail that plank into place. Slowly, but surely, you are building your own floor. You survived the house you grew up in. Now, it is time to build a home you can actually rest in. If this video resonated with you, if it gave you even a single piece of clarity today, please hit that subscribe button. We are building a safe community here for people who are doing the incredibly hard work of healing, and I would love for you to be a part of it. And please, leave a comment below and tell me, what was your biggest realization while watching this video? Or, what is one boundary you are going to set to protect your peace this week? I read every single comment. You are not alone, you are not broken, and you are going to be okay. I will see you in the next video.